Well, I'm very excited. Yeah, that's all right, James. I've got James Schannep here, who is, well, a prolific author. You've done quite a few over the last few years of the Click Your Poison books.
That's right. Yeah, I've been around long enough that that was a cool title because ebooks were the future.
It's a fantastic idea. It's a little bit like Netflix before they had the net
There
site.
we go. Yes.
Great future thinking, and you've got great titles as well. I really like the sort of the one-word titles. We've got spied, marooned, pathogens, superpowers. Oh, that's two words. Murdered, infected, and is that all of them? Is that not all? That's quite a few, but
Have you listed six?
I may have done. Yes, that's so you've done six so far.
Yes, I'm working on my seventh, which I thought would be good to use a lucky number instead of a, ill-fated for my haunted series. I don't want to bring any bad omens around for a ghost story. But this one will be kind of my version of a dungeon crawl in a way, where you are sent into a extremely haunted house and the entire book itself is one big puzzle for you to solve. I'm also kind of doing some somewhat of heady stuff to toy with the idea of truth and perception. So it's whatever you believe, the house will sort of change based around your choices and kind of like what you bring into it is what you'll find in the house.
I like the sound of that. That's right up my street. That's,
thanks.
Well, we're going to be doing House of Hell actually, so
yeah,
definitely up.
I'm excited to watch that for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, you join in. Now, let's take you back to when you first picked up your very first. Was it Choose Your Own Adventure, or was it?
Yes. So, as an American, in case the accent didn't give it away, that was the main, or really the only that I was aware of growing up, interactive form of storytelling. So it wasn't until really I was looking around to see if anyone had written more grown-up versions of those books, because those were a lot of fun when I was a kid, but they're fairly simplistic. I went later and mapped the story charts, and there's some logic inconsistencies. Like there's one where you're looking for your uncle, and if you go one way, he's in a truck being carried away, and if you go the other way, he's inside of a museum in a sarcophagus. And I'm like, how can those things exist at the same time where I haven't changed it? So anyway, long way of saying that I wanted something a little more complex and grown up, and was looking around and came across all these wonderful series done over in UK and Europe. And so, yeah, that was kind of something I was like, well, I never grew up with dice and stat tracking and that kind of thing, but I can do very complex decisions. So that's kind of what I leaned into. So each of my books have at least 3 unique storylines inside of them, and they're meant to be replayed over and over. There's no necessarily like you found the very best ending, you're done with the book. Yeah. It's kind of layered approach. So my murder mystery, I would say, is sort of impossible to solve on one read through. You kind of go through it and you get to an ending and you go, okay, now I understand this reveal. I should go back and ask, that one guy that I was interrogating this other question, and that'll help, kind of peel back the layers and help solve the mystery.
That sounds cool. I'm going to try and dive into your brain and see how you got to that point. So, what did you study? What were you like as a child? Were you very analytical, or were you a puzzle solver, or were you just watching lots of horror movies?
So, yes. I've actually, I have a very evenly split brain. When I was doing all the standardized testing to get into college here, the SATs were, one part written in language and the other part math, and my scores were within 10 points of each other. So I'm very split. My university degree, I have a bachelor's of science of English literature with a minor in general engineering. So I have equal parts love. This is why interactive fiction works really well for me, because I love the branching and the flow charts and all of that, but I also am really into the storytelling and character development and all those parts as well.
It really shows, actually. It's very interesting. So were you a game player? Did you do other role-playing games when you were at college? And
yeah, my first I've been writing since I was a young child, but none of it was like I'm going to be an author one day. It was more just like I really enjoyed this Chrono Trigger on Super Nintendo, and I wish there was more stuff to it. So I'll make extra adventures and that kind of thing. So it really was just a love of games and storytelling brought together from the very beginning. And when I went to school, I went to the United States Air Force Academy. I did a few years as a military officer. And part of that was because I wasn't ready to take the vow of poverty to be a writer. So if you go to a school like that, you can study whatever, I can study English literature and still have a job at the end of my time there. But I just never stopped writing for fun. And eventually, when I finished my service commitment and was looking for something else to do, it was my wife that just said, "You're always writing. You should just do that." Yeah. So I really appreciate her for doing that, and for also, helping provide health insurance and helping pay the mortgage so I can pursue this dream.
So is this what your full-time job now?
It is, yeah. And well, of course, also we have 2 kids now, so that's a big part of my full-time job. But yes, I am very lucky to have a patron for my arts, as I call my wife.
Fantastic. So the very first book you wrote, which one was that? That
was Infected.
Yeah.
And that actually, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So how did that come about, and what was the writing process, and how does that compare to how it is now?
Sure. So some of my early experiments in writing was I was doing screenwriting and screenplays, and I was enjoying zombie movies and that kind of thing, and was like, there's always a little cheesiness or that kind of thing with these zombie things, which is a huge part of the fun. I'm not going to take that away, but I thought, I can write. I should write one of these. I've got so many. Every time I watch a movie, I'm like, what happens if they did that? So I went ahead and wrote the screenplay, shopped it around Hollywood, and was told, we really like this, but we really want zombie stories that are based on an intellectual property. We want there to be a comic book or whatever, a novel. And so that was part of it. Was like, well, I guess, I'll go one step beyond. And I'll start the novel. And it was really just a chance conversation with a friend, reminiscing about choose your own adventure books, and it came up as, has anyone ever done that for adults or older readers? And the 2 ideas were in my head at the same time. So I thought, Would You Survive the Zombie Apocalypse is a great premise for a game book. So that was what launched it, and I found that I loved writing the format. So haven't looked back.
Have you thought about reversing it and then doing an interactive film from this now? So
funny you should say that. I can't say too much, but I am working with a production company. We're still trying to get financing, so I can't mention all the details, but fingers crossed, knock on wood, all that kind of thing. That is something I'm hoping to, step back into my love of movies and screenplays, but bring my love of interactive fiction with it and write interactive films.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So hopefully you'll hear more about that at some point.
That's great. Excellent. I had an inkling that might be where you're heading. Right. So let's go on for the next one, which was, is it Murdered?
Yes. Murdered was my second one. And that one of the things I loved about choose your own adventure books and all these other type of books is that you can have a series, but it doesn't have to be the exact same protagonist, the exact same, story world. So you can go from a zombie apocalypse horror thing to a murder mystery, and it can still be the same series. And I think that's fantastic. I always, admired that about filmmakers. Steven Spielberg can make a, cute family-friendly alien movie, but then he can also make the scariest shark movie ever made, and he can still be that same guy. So I think that writers shouldn't have to pigeonhole ourselves either. We can do what we find interesting. Yeah. And so I set Murdered in present day, but I wanted it to have kind of a crime noir feel. And so in part of brainstorming of that, I ended up going with the sort of lawlessness of Rio de Janeiro. So it takes place in Brazil. And I love research as well. So I try to make all my details as accurate as they can be. I did travel guides for Brazil and all sorts of things to really make it authentic, which worked out well later because a few years down the road, my wife and I decided to travel to Brazil, and we kind of reverse engineered my travel guide, and we skipped all the endings where you get murdered in the favelas, and we just did the fun tourist bits of the book. But it actually, there were a couple things where I was like, oh yeah, that looks a little different in person. But for the most part, I think it did pretty well.
You vindicated. That's awesome. And the next one again is quite a departure. So I see what you mean. Not pitching how. Although you've cleverly got all the titles and the artwork, so it looks like a lovely sort of seamless series, even though they're different genres. Now it's super powered. When did this one come out? When did you write this one?
That was third. Yep, you are correct in my chronology. So these have each taken me about a year to plot out, research, complete. So these first three were each about a year apart. And this is where I actually kind of started having the books somewhat relate in a story world, because in a world where you can get superpowers and one of them, you could be a super genius and invent all sorts of things. You can sort of slide through the multiverse a little bit. And so you can find, very minor spoiler, a world where there are zombies, and it's kind of, you've traveled into the first book of Infected a little bit, just, cool. Hints of the same kind of thing. So I really enjoyed that. So going forward, I started using, the corporations that I had used, made it to several other books. There's the government agents that you can work with in Murdered show up later in their career in Spied. So there's, even though each one is completely a standalone book, and I like to say that you can start where you want. If you're into superheroes, start there. But I've kind of given little Easter eggs for Click Your Poison fans that if they have read multiple books in the series, they'll go, oh, I remember, that city that you mentioned, that this fictitious city is now in this other book as well. That's kind of a nice nod to the other one.
That's great. Have you been tempted so far to, not do a sequel to one, or a prequel to one of the themes?
Pathogens is most directly tied in to Infected. It's not technically a sequel or a prequel. It happens at the same time. So I call it an equal. And so in Infected, you are playing as kind of the generic you, would you survive? What do you do? And in Pathogens, your first choice is actually pick one of 6 characters that appear as non-player characters in Infected and survive the initial outbreak from their shoes, sort of up to the point of where you would meet them in the other book. So they take place simultaneously, one sort of, 6 mini adventures versus the other being your main adventure. But they kind of form one larger cohesive whole in a way.
Yeah, that's cool. And again, the artwork's fantastic. Have you got the same artist to do these?
I met up with Brian Silviera, started at Superpowered. With Infected and Murdered, it was a woman named Nikki Jansen, who is currently Lieutenant Colonel Nikki Jansen, because I met her during my Air Force time, and she was someone, just doing her artwork on the side while she pursued that flying career. But she has definitely, gone the full military career, and I think she still loves her art, but shouldn't have as much time with, starting her own family and flying and that kind of thing. So I was fortunate enough to meet Brian in California when I was living here the first time. When I went to a wine tasting room and did a live reading of Infected, and he happened to just be the sommelier behind the bar, and he was like, wow, that's really cool. I love that you are doing these books, and et cetera, et cetera. And we got to talking, and he was someone who just kind of drew in his spare time, but did fantastic work. And I'm like, you need to actually be employed to do this. And I'd love to help out in a little way if I can. And he actually has his own graphic novels now and that kind of thing. So I like to think that our meeting inspired him also to expand that part of his life.
Oh,
so he's done all my covers since Superpowered.
Yeah,
with the exception,
fantastic. Yeah, they're
I
really
guess the exception is Spied. It's kind of a there's little like clip art spy men on there, so it's not necessarily a drawn cover. It's more of a created cover, I guess.
So tell me about Marooned. Yeah,
certainly. So then I did move to the United Kingdom, which is where I've met many of our probably fine viewers who are here today. So hello, if any of you are watching this. And with the love of research and wanting to dive into a world with each one, that's part of the fun for me. Is I get to, 1 year I'm a comic book super fan. You know, the next year I get to do everything about pirates and seafaring and that kind of thing. So I figured it was a great time while I was living in England, and I had, you know, could go down to Greenwich and the maritime air museums there and really dive deep into the culture I was living in. So I decided to set it in the golden age of piracy in the 1700s there. And the idea with Marooned is, with the 3 unique storylines, you can end up marooned on a deserted island, which I'll say all of that is actually real survival knowledge. If you have any survival knowledge or would like some, Marooned will help you survive a desert island. And I can say that because if it doesn't, you won't be around to sue me. But yeah, so there's the pirate one and there's a Royal Navy career you can do as well. And each of those storylines, kind of like my other books, you'll see things within the book. So if you're in the Royal Navy career, you might be chasing some pirates that you can later interact with in the pirate path. And, you know, those sort of the storylines within the book run parallel with each other.
Nice.
If that makes sense.
Fantastic. How many sections do you normally have in your books? Have you got a standard number that you try and stick to?
So I don't do numbered paragraphs. I do named chapters. So that's kind of my way of helping people have a save game, is that if you, with over 50 possible endings, there's a lot of grisly deaths, but if you do, you can go back to a recent, if you remember what the chapter was called. And so I always do these kind of cheeky pun, easy to remember chapters. So I don't have numbered sections, but I can say that each one is 100,000 words or more. So they're full novel length books.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. And then your latest one, which I believe is Spied.
Yes. And that one was after a small hiatus that took about, after I did Marooned. It was not a necessarily intentional hiatus as far as writing goes. I was still writing in the background, but I had a couple kids. I moved from England back to the States, and, you know, we'd had this whole global pandemic thing that everyone's been working with. So yes, I released Spied at the very beginning of this year. And if I can manage to keep on track with Haunted, if there's no, you know, unforeseen events here, then that'll be my first time to ever put out 2 books in the same year. So after a nice little hiatus between books, I'm catching up a little bit. But Spied is one, you know, I definitely use some of my military background in there. Part of the events take place at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is local to the community I'm at now. So there's locations I have been to and things like that. And obviously it's over the top, you know, you want to feel like James Bond when you're playing a spy thriller, but
Sorry,
like
when's
I said,
it set, James?
A slightly future, I suppose, modern day, but yeah, there's meant to be technology and things like that that are near possible. So it should feel more like the brand new Bond movies rather than the classic era.
Yes, that's it. No invisible cars.
No, indeed not.
Thank goodness for that. That's amazing. Okay, so obviously you're working on one at the moment.
Yes.
Is it just one you're working on, or have you got several projects?
It's the one book. I am also, like I said, behind the scenes working on the screenwriting element. But thankfully, while we try to put financing into place, it's kind of, you know, I can take a break and work on this other project. So I'm kind of racing one project with the other, where I'd like to get the first draft of Haunted done before they're ready for me to do the next draft of this other project.
And how do you fund them? Do you do Kickstarters or do you self?
No, I'm self-funded, so I self-publish them. I hire out the artist, I hire out the editors. I'm kind of the one-stop shop, and then I just go straight to release. So as soon as it's available for sale, there's no, you know, waits after a Kickstarter fund or anything like that. It's just print on demand and ready to go from there.
So worldwide, on you know, as soon as it's out.
Yes, that's right.
I think that's right. Is it just softback? Do you do hardback as well? Or?
I've recently started doing that. So I did a 10th anniversary hardback of Infected, because that's where I'm at now. And that's the first time I've actually had illustrations inside the book. So this is kind of like a special deluxe edition with, you know, illustrated things. And so I've had a lot of positive reception to that. So I'm considering kind of going to my back catalog and next making a deluxe illustrated version of Murdered. And I put a lot of bonus features in it as well. So it's more than just illustrations. There's the opening to the screenplay for Infected in that one. I would probably put some of my travel logs from Murdered from actually having visited there. So there's a little bit of retrospective on the book as well. So immediate release will be paperback and ebook, but down the line we'll have deluxe illustrated versions of other books.
That's fantastic. And where can people kind of see you? Do you go to conventions? You said you did a reading, a book reading. Do you still plan to do that?
When there's not a pandemic going on, I really do enjoy meeting people. I've been to 2 of the Fighting Fantasy Fests, and if it's happening for the 40th anniversary next summer and John Green will let me in, I'd be happy to come out and meet people for that as well. But here in the States, kind of a nice thing about my wife, her career being military related, is we move a lot. So it gives me an opportunity to meet new bookstores, venues for various conventions for gaming and that as well. And so I kind of always try to tap into whatever community I happen to be in, and then I'll put that on my website or Facebook or Twitter to let people locally know that that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, do you tend to write for adults, or do you think that do you have a younger crowd?
Yeah, so I would say it's definitely a grown-up audience intended. I have a lot of teenage readers, but I think people in their 20s and 30s and up all really do connect with these books. But there's, I would say, like, for example, Infected is meant to be an R-rated movie. It's meant to be, what you would expect for a good zombie movie. So if you have a young child that you may not want to have reading about people eating other people, that might not be the best one for them.
Kids love that kind of thing. I always throw in a lot of gore into mine, and they love that. It's just how you frame it.
Yeah, but I think, like, for example, Spy, would be a PG-13 spy movie. So I think that, within I like to give parents the leeway to make that decision for themselves, for their own children. And, maybe they want to read it for themselves first, because I do think there's a lot in there for adults. I do write books that if I had discovered them, I would enjoy them as an adult.
That's great. Now, I've got a couple of questions from Facebook, and
Sure.
Rob Crew asks, what is your first game book memory? And there's several bits here. What book do you have planned after Haunted? And if I'll recap on this, if you could replay one game book for the first time, which would it be?
Okay. All right. So my first experience actually was, we had a Scholastic book fair here in the States when I was in elementary school, probably about 2nd or 3rd grade. And they had a door prize. I was, I don't know, kid number 99 through the door or whatever it was. And they gave me a $20 gift certificate to spend on books, which, I felt like I'd won the lottery, basically, because I'm like, I can buy anything in here. I'm so, and so, yeah, I think at that point I was looking around and I saw a big stand of Choose Your Own Adventure. I think I stocked up pretty heavily on that, maybe some Magic School Bus as well, that might explain my scientific bent. But yeah, I think I just felt like, king for the day, where I, what stands before me that I could not claim with my $20 gift certificate? So that's probably one of my earliest fond memories of, I just was so excited to get my hands on those and get home and start reading through them.
And the other question was, what book do you have planned after Haunted?
Sure. So I have several in my idea file. So I'm not certain which one will be next. Part of that is because if the screenwriting movie thing is going to jump off, then I'll probably lean more into that for a little while. But I have a Western I'd really like to write. Eventually, I'd like to do a time travel sort of open world. Everyone tells me I'm insane for considering that because of all the possible ramifications of freedom of choice on the entire spectrum of time. And I have another idea that one day I'd like to do a traditional novel series that has tie-in game books. So you kind of have now where you have, Star Wars or Indiana Jones or things like that people can pull from. I'd like to build my own universe and then let people play in it in an interactive book as well. So lots, I guess, would be the answer to that, Rob. Thank you.
and his last question is, if you could replay one game book for the first time and experience it all over again.
Sure. So I think if I could do it again, I would like to re-experience Blood of the Zombies, actually, because that was my first interaction with fighting fantasy. I didn't quite know what I was getting. And so I think if I could go afresh, I probably would try to play it fair for the first time. Because I think having come from Choose Your Own Adventure, I didn't have any dice with me. I was just, reading this book and didn't have any pencil either. So I just made choices, which was interesting. It's a very fun zombie story. But if I could kind of brain wipe myself and put myself in front of it with a pad of paper and pencil and some dice, I would do it the proper way the first time.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think for me it would be probably City of Thieves. It just got me the right time. It's just a nice visual. I love the illustrations and the world. You can kind of just smell them, all the discovery.
Sure. Yeah.
It's exciting for me. And then we got Rue Pescod asks, what do you see as the most important and interesting evolution in game books from the 80s to today?
Well, I think the easy answer for me would be technology and ebooks and that kind of thing, because I've hyperlinked my ebooks. We have interactive movies now, which have never existed before. But I'll get the easy answer out of the way, and then I'll give maybe a more complex one. But I think that we've gone really deep into what it can be. So there were some of the Choose Your Own Adventure where the choice was kind of a gimmick and story came second. But I think now we have where choice can be part of the story. So we have authors working in this genre that really are telling stories that can't be told in a traditional novel. You couldn't necessarily have it be linear because, like I was saying with some of mine, you have to go back and read it a second or third time to fully appreciate it. So I think that's the biggest change is in this game book revolution where we have so many new authors, they're taking it very seriously as its own art form rather than a experiment, but I think is kind of how it started back in the day.
No, good answer. Fantastic. Right, now, what are you working on at the moment? I mean, I know you've got a Facebook group at the moment, which is a little bit different to others, which is more of a book club.
Yes, so it's a mouthful. It's the Interactive Fiction and Game Books Discussion Group (parentheses Book Club). The idea was if anyone was searching for game book discussion group or interactive fiction book club, you'd find us essentially. But yes, so there's lots of Facebook far and wide. Let's discuss everything that's ever been created. So I wanted to do something a little different, and we are very laser focused on one topic. We pick one book for a month. It's a book club. And so far I've been very fortunate that I've reached out to the authors and they kind of host month by month, and they have discussion questions. People can ask them a Q&A at the end. And it's really is an interactive book club, which is great for this genre. And I feel fortunate that I've had so much great participation. I actually started it very selfishly just because I felt like I hadn't had enough time to read, and I wanted to kind of put my feet to the fire. And so I said, if I make this book club, I'll force myself to read one game book per month. And I'm glad that other people seem to be enjoying it. And you yourself will be joining us to host very soon. You have the honor of October, so you get the spooky month there.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, we are as well. And I think, seeing all your background and everything, I think you're definitely going to raise the bar a little.
Well, thank you. What other authors have you had on there so far? I mean, I presume you can go back through and look at the thread and.
So we did do Victoria Hancock's, we didn't do Night Shift, we did The Phantom himself, but I'm looking forward to not your necessarily, but the Game Book Day playthrough of her book. We had David Lowery's Psycho Killer. We had My Spide, Adam Mitchell, Sam Isaacson. We got KJ Shadman's The Island of Dr. Moreau. Jam Hirons, who I know is a big friend and fan of yours. We did his Druids of Numa book. And then we're currently discussing Martin Nauch's Steam Highwayman. We're going to do a graphic novel for the next one called Captive. And I've just found out recently that the author of that is a French gentleman who his name is probably about as easy to say as mine. So I'll just say his first name is Emmanuel Q. Thank you for joining us. And then, of course, yourself, and we have John Green for November. And then I will be rounding out the year for Haunted. We also have interest from Sven Harder, who I believe you already have recorded the interview. Yes. So he'll hopefully be joining us in the new year, along with Mark Lane. David Gilson says he has more for us. So I think we've are very lucky to have no shortage of new material to dive into. So as long as I can, I'm going to keep it author involvement, and we will discuss, what makes their books special in this group.
Fantastic. I think that's the remarkable thing about doing an international game book day, is that we are being introduced to authors we would never normally sort of come across.
Sure,
and it's so exciting to see how everyone's moving it along and making it their own, respecting the past and bringing it to a new audience. I think it's
absolutely
it's an exciting time to be in. So James, thank you so much for your time. Now, if someone is desperate to follow you and find out your books, I presume that all of them are on Amazon at the moment. Is that the best way to get them?
Yep. So that's the easiest way, is to find me on Amazon. If you have a local bookstore you really like, they should be able to order it in. If you'd prefer to do that, they can be brought into any bookstore. But the fastest way will definitely be Amazon, and that's also where you can get the Kindle ebook edition that's hyperlinked. But the paperbacks, I call them the e-aversion version, because people who don't want an ebook necessarily, but they are just as good with their turn to page X, Y, or Z. And if you can spell my last name, Schannep, you can find me. There's not very many of us out there.
That's great. And are you on Instagram, Twitter, or things like that? Is that a best way to contact you?
Yes. So I have a website, jamesschannep.com. Clickyourpoison.com redirects there if you forget how to spell my name. But I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, and I absolutely love when people reach out to me. There's nothing better than kind of waking up after the kids have been up all night and getting back to the computer to do some writing and to see a message. It's like, hey, I can't wait for Haunted. I'm really excited. And you go, okay, it's reinvigorating. So if anyone wants to say hi, please do.
And last question before I let you go, have you got a rough date for Haunted, for the release? Have you?
I do not have a rough date yet. I've set the discussion group for December to say that it definitely will be out prior to that. So I'd say in October, if I can manage it for, Haunted for Halloween, but definitely November if not.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time, and good luck, and look forward to seeing you later on, or in the flesh on the Fighting Fantasy 40th. 4th.
Yes.
Is it 40th?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes, of course. And thank you very much for having me, Ollie.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.